Today I am going to give you a very short, condensed introduction to React Suspense. React Suspense is super cool. I'm going to try to cover all of the features that are, like, I guess, public in the experimental phase of this thing in 20-ish minutes. So we'll see how far we get. But yeah, so a couple things. There's like 4 things that I'm not really going to cover, which is if you want to use this, there's this new like experimental channel. You just npm npm install react at experimental, and you get one of these like weird hash versions. So that's the first thing that you need to know that I'm not going to be talking about. And then you don't use react dom.render anymore. You use this like create root thing if you want to use concurrent mode. I'm not going to talk about that. And error boundaries, if you're not using them, it's basically you just copy and paste this code into your application and you have an error boundary. So I've already done that here, so I'm not going to be showing you how to do that. And then finally, there's another piece of code that I have copy and pasted, which you will understand later. But this is used in all of the React Suspense or concurrent mode documentation. So I've just copied and pasted that so I don't have to do it while we're talking. So the other thing is I buy way too many domain names. So if you want links to anything regarding this, I'll put the GitHub thing on there too. You can go to reactsuspense.com. Let's dive in. So the first thing the first place that I like to start with Suspense is back in my application. For a year now, we've been able to use Suspense with this feature called react.lazy, which allows us to dynamically load code kind of after we've like rendered our initial app to the client. It's called code splitting. And so that's actually, so we've been able to use React Suspense with that, for that use case for like a little over a year now. So to show you your first Suspense component, we're just going to change this from a static import to a dynamic import. And those look like this. So we say import, and we give it the path. We call import as a function. So Pokemon detail. My typing might be a little bit off today because my N key is broken, and I just got a flu shot, so my left arm is a little numb. So import is just a promise, right? And so promises can have 3 statuses. They can be pending, resolved, or rejected. Now, React itself does not know how to like work with promises like directly. So anytime we have a promise that we want to like know the status of and be able to connect it to React, we have to wrap it in something else that knows how to like tell React what's going on. So we're going to wrap it in this handy little function that React gives us called React Lazy. And then we'll just assign that to the name that we had before, which is Pokemon detail. No, I'll just type it then. And now everything should break violently. So in order to like do all of this like Suspense-y stuff, Suspense is a way to kind of like, while things are loading, easily show fallback stuff. Now, this screen is so small. Okay, let's see if I can find what I'm looking for. Okay, so one of my favorite things is the React errors are always super good, and they give us this really thing. It's like, hey, an error occurred. Like, if you want to know what happened, like try to install one of these error boundaries. They give you a link. Talked about that. I already copy and pasted that into my code, and it's right here. So we'll just use one of those. Import error boundary from forum. Error boundary, cool. And then what we do is we just wrap the broken part of our code with that. Okay, we hit save. I'm gonna have to refresh on this side. Now, something super cool happens here. When we have an error boundary, first of all, it captures that error, and the way I have mine implemented, it logs that out for me to know what the error was. Second of all, anytime we put an error boundary in here, it actually protects the rest of our application from blowing up. So a second ago it was blowing up. Now this still renders fine, and anything else on the page would render fine, even though this got borked, which is sweet. So our error boundary component is catching that error. It's logging out the source of the problem to the console, which is telling us, hey, you need a suspense component. Like this thing is suspending. It's in a pending state, but you're not doing anything with that yet. So we just add one of those. React.suspense fallback. We'll just give it anything here. We'll say like loading Pokemon. So again, this is going to be in our pending state that we're going to see this message. Format that. Cool. So all we've done at this point is now we're lazy loading this component. So this component, this is like our main bundle in our application, and then once that loads, it then dynamically fetches this and kind of loads that component. Now, one thing that's really cool, I have the Chrome, the React DevTools for Chrome installed here, and I can actually, let's make this a little bit bigger. Because I have the suspense component, I can actually click this little thing and then see the loading state. So with very little code, I now have like the component that I want to render, that I'm like loading asynchronously, a fallback state, and then catching any errors that happen. And then in here, if I wanted to style this and like don't want to have to like change the network speed to like 0, I can just like toggle this on and off. Really handy little tool there. So that's your first suspense component. Super easy. You got your thing. It renders when it's resolved. In the case that it's waiting, it shows the fallback, and then if there's ever an error, it's going to show this error state. Now, like I said, all of these are just promises. We don't really have a lot of time to for me to show you all these things, but you can go in here and you can change this to promise.reject, and it'll reject it right away, and you'll see the error boundary enacted. Or you can give it a promise that doesn't resolve, and you see this suspense just kind of hang there indefinitely. So you can play with that, just promises all the way down. So how does this all connect to data fetching? If we want to use this not for components, but we want to use this for data, how do we do that? Well, I copy and pasted a little bit of code that's in all of the concurrent docs, and I have a little API function. So we're going to fetch a Pokemon. We'll just give it an ID, and it'll just kind of give us all the data for a Pokemon using the Poke API, which is dope. Now, again, anytime we have so fetch returns a promise, and anytime we have a promise that we want to communicate the status of to React, we have to wrap it in some type of wrapper that actually connects the statuses to React land language. And then this I just copy and pasted from the docs. I'm going to call this Suspensify. You can read more about that if you want, but basically it's just that connective tissue between our raw promise and React. So let's go in here and let's import some data. So const, we'll call this initial Pokemon. We're going to fetch Pokemon of 1, and we're going to suspensify that. We'll then import, fetch Pokemon, and suspensify from API. Okay, let's see how we did. Okay, cool. So now we have this, our initial Pokemon. Let's send it down to our Pokemon detail component. I'm bound to make mistakes, so call them out as you see them. Oops. Okay, now one thing about the way this API is situated is that these, in order to actually recall, so let's say your promise is pending and it suspends your component. In order to actually recall that, we need to have a function that we can call. And so the one thing that this gives us is suspense will return an object with a read function, and that's what actually allows us to reread once that promise is resolved. So we are going to just interpolate that out. Pokemon read, we're going to call that function. And from the resulting object, we're going to call name on that. And then we get Bulbasaur. Pretty easy. Not a whole lot of lines of code to be able to use Suspense for data fetching. So pretty easy so far. We have a Pokemon. We're passing that resource down to this component that we're lazily rendering. We're wrapping up all of our promises in a way that can communicate all of this to Suspense, which is super dope. Now I'm going to change something in our API just so we can see some of the other sweet benefits. So here I'm just kind of randomizing like how long each of these requests is going to take to simulate some level of latency, and this is so we kind of see some random wait times for this loading Pokemon fallback. Whoa, what'd I do? Cool. So let's see, what's the next thing I want to talk about? Okay, cool. So we have a Pokemon. We want to now like grab the next Pokemon. I mean, like even in a 20-minute talk, an app that just loads one Pokemon is not super interesting. So we're gonna add a button. Button type. Button. And this is gonna go to the next Pokemon. Have some kind of on-click handler there. And I think for now, let's just alert dot read ID +1. So we're just going to alert the ID of the next Pokemon. I think that's, oops, no breakpoint. Okay, so we hit next and we get 2. Cool. Now, if we want to keep our Pokemon around and like be able to switch on that, we can use useState to actually like track which Pokemon we want to be on. So let's use that. So we'll use this useState hook. We'll give it our initial Pokemon to start. That'll be our default or our starting place. We'll take the resulting Pokemon that we get as Pokemon. So we'll pull that off as Pokemon. Now we got to change up our code a little bit. Pokemon, send that resource down, and then over here. What was that? Line 40. Oh yeah, poke a. Cool. There we go. Okay, so now we're using React State to store that. So we can actually update this in state. So we'll change this to set Pokemon. We'll peel that function out this array. And then we can just call that same function again. Let's grab that. Our suspensified fetch Pokemon with the new ID. Add a couple parentheses onto that thing. Let's see what we get. Cool. So now we can kind of progress through. We see this whole like loading state dance. It's going to be randomized every time. And that's looking pretty good. But we have a little issue here. We now have 4 errors. So React is usually pretty good about errors. So let's see what that's about. Warning, app triggered a user blocking update that suspended. To fix this, split the update into multiple parts. So one thing that concurrent mode does, and so this will be new to you if you've if Suspense and concurrent mode are new to you. Concurrent mode allows you to, or allows React to make decisions about what the most high priority things are to like re-render the page. So the thing is that like I'm doing this fetching, but between the fetching and the re-rendering and the suspending and all that kind of stuff, this might actually block like user interactivity if I had like 5 other buttons and I wanted to like click those while I was doing this thing. So this is warning me saying like, hey, all of your things, all of your set states and all of your suspensified business is all like kind of like high priority. You're in the fast lane right now. You can deprioritize these with useTransition. So let's useTransition. React.useTransition. And then by convention, this first element on the array is start transition. Okay, you can name it whatever the heck you want, but by convention, that's how you'll see it in the docs. Now, start transition is pretty easy. Anytime we have like a set state or something like that, we're just going to wrap it. So we have our set state for Pokemon that does that like fetch request. We're just going to wrap that in start transition, and now that error should go away. Whoops. I clicked it too fast. Whoops. What was that? Did I set another breakpoint? Freaking. Oh, wait, maybe because I'm in the source panel on accident. Yeah, that was it. Okay, cool. Why does that happen? Oh, man. Or maybe I did actually break something. Oh, well. Anyway, it works enough. Yeah, but that didn't fit in the 20 minutes, Michael. Okay, so we're gonna go with it. Hopefully, here, maybe if I just close the Chrome DevTools, it'll work. There we go. There we go. It's working now. Hey, yeah. So hopefully your users don't have the Chrome DevTools open, because this would just break for them. This is the speed run, okay? Okay, so now, the thing is that there's this concept now of the, they call it like a receded state. You'll see this in the documentation, where you click this thing, and then you see this like loading Pokemon again. And that's because we're doing this fetch that's telling the component like, hey, we're doing some work, so like, can you show the fallback, please? But that's not really how we like interact with user interfaces. We like to keep the thing that we already have around. So useTransition takes some customization options, and one of them is I can never spell this word right, timeout MS. And we can set a threshold for how long we want the previous rendering to stick around before we jump to the next one. Which is pretty cool. So I just add that one configuration point, and now this is going to hold on to Bulbasaur until Ivysaur comes back. So I'll click it again. It's going to hold on to Ivysaur until Venusaur comes back, which is pretty neat. But you'll notice like this still isn't very great user interface, because we're clicking the button and we don't there's no indication that like something's happening. So they thought of this as well. And the second element that useTransition returns, by convention, we call it is pending, is a Boolean. And we can use that to kind of show certain, like an indication that things are happening while the work is happening to fetch that data. So let's see, so pending, we'll just put like 3 dots right there. Okay, so if I hit next, now I get a little 3 dots, and then as soon as that thing resolves, the dots go away. The dots. So obviously you would want to make this like prettier, because that's not like super beautiful. But is pending is how you would like provide some additional cues to your user that something is, that work is happening. You can present that to them right away, and then they immediately go away as soon as that everything is resolved, which is super sweet. Okay, so that's it. That's pretty much it. Except, let's add some more data. I know I'm like really close on time here, so we're just gonna do a little bit more. So Pokemon collection. We're gonna fetch the collection of Pokemon. So we'll call it with no arguments. That'll just get all of them. And then we're gonna make a component function Pokemon collection. It's going to just read that directly. Pokemon collection dot read. It's getting hairy. Dot count. Okay, so count is just like some meta property on the returned. Oh. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so we have that. Now we can render it. Let's just copy this whole little. Let's copy this whole little thing since we already got it, and this will be loading all Pokemon. We'll delete this off of there. Pokemon collection. Cool. Okay, so now we see, you got to see there just for a split second that these kind of load independently, right? And so the first one to resolve is going to be the first one to render, and then the other one kind of, when it resolves, it renders. It'd be nice if we could coordinate how these things render. And React does give us a pretty nifty tool for this called SuspenseList. And this is for any time you have a bunch of suspense components that you want to coordinate their rendering together. So I'm going to save this, and it's going to blow up, or it should blow up. I think as soon as we use one of the props, it'll blow up. So the prop that you have to control these is called reveal order, and there are three options. There is together, forwards, and backwards. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that the direct children of this suspense list need to be suspense components. So you can just swap these error boundaries in place. You'll get the same effective behavior, but now you can have the suspense on the outside for the suspense list. So we're using together, and you'll notice that as I refresh this, these will always render together. So this is kind of like promise.all. All of them have to resolve before any of them can render, which is kind of nice. You can change this to be forwards, which will always resolve the first one first. So sometimes they'll render together, but if I can refresh it enough times so that the first one comes in before, screw off. Not you. Man, I cannot get anything done with those DevTools open. What did I do? I have a break. I accidentally clicked a breakpoint somewhere. I'm sure of it. Okay, do it. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah, we found one. We got one. Whew. Okay, so we got one. So reveal order. That's pretty sweet. So now. No. Okay, so one last one, and then we'll learn about Rust. There's one other property that you'll want to know about, and this is actually pretty neat. In conjunction with reveal order, this can give you some really nice user experiences. So tail is like, what does it do with the rest of the list? So as it's rendering the first one, let's say you have 10 things in this list. Like, what does it do with all the rest of the 10? You don't want to see like 10 individual loading states, right? So tail has two options: hidden and collapsed. Hidden is just like, don't show me anything. Okay, I don't know if you saw that. I'll render it again, and of course they're going to come in together. But basically, it's not going to show you anything. Okay, so collapsed is actually is my favorite, and this is what we'll end with. What it does is it doesn't show the second one until the first one's resolved. So you render. I know. Is it once in a lifetime opportunity right there? I need to learn how to write more diverse set timeouts is what I'm learning. So anyway, it's a pretty cool little feature which I will never be able to get to enact again. So anyway, those are like pretty much all of the things that are available to know about Suspense at this point. So now you're an expert, you know everything, and good luck.